You're wasting everyone's time, pal.
Sir, I'm just asking for a fair interview.
Fair? You walked in here wearing a $30 jacket. That's not management material.
You walked in here wearing a $30 jacket. That's not management material. Marcus Cole stood perfectly still in the middle of the gleaming lobby at Whitmore Logistics, his resume clutched in his right hand. The hiring manager, a man named Gerald Fenwick with an overly tight tie and a receding hairline, snorted as he looked Marcus up and down. His cheap polyester blazer seemed to offend Gerald personally. The receptionist froze behind her marble desk, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. 3 other applicants in the waiting area pretended to study their phones, but their eyes kept darting up. Everyone felt the tension crackling in the air. Gerald tossed the resume onto the floor. The single sheet of paper floated down, landing face up near Marcus's scuffed brown shoes. The words Harvard MBA summa cum laude were clearly visible on the first line. Gerald didn't bother to read them. He saw the worn jacket, the lack of a luxury watch, and the quiet confidence of a man who didn't feel the need to brag. He interpreted stillness as weakness. He was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his career. "Security will escort you out," Gerald said, raising his voice so the entire lobby could hear. "We don't hire strays off the street for corporate strategy roles. Go apply for a forklift position if you're that desperate." Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He looked past Gerald, towards the executive elevator where the brass nameplate read M. Cole, Chairman. It had been installed 3 days ago. Gerald had never met the mysterious new owner who had purchased the company in a silent acquisition. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek black keycard, and watched Gerald's smirk begin to twitch. "You've made a very expensive mistake, Gerald," Marcus said, his voice low and steady. "I'll see you in the boardroom in 30 minutes. If you're loving this story, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. From where are you watching today? Let's get into the full story." The morning started cold and gray 6 hours earlier. Marcus Cole woke up in a modest studio apartment on the south side of Viridian City, 22 miles from the glass tower that he legally owned. The walls were thin. He could hear his neighbor, a retired nurse named Mrs. Gable, listening to her morning news broadcast through the plaster. His mattress sat directly on the floor. His closet held exactly 5 shirts, all of them off the rack from a discount chain called Value Mart. The coffee maker was a single-cup drip machine that cost him $11. Most people in Marcus's financial position would have been living in a penthouse with panoramic views, sipping imported espresso while a private chef prepared their breakfast. His net worth sat at approximately $430 million. He had built a logistics empire from the ground up, starting with a single delivery truck when he was 22 years old. In over 18 years, he acquired, merged, and expanded until Whitmore Logistics became the target. It was a struggling giant, bleeding cash due to incompetent middle management and bloated executive salaries. Marcus saw the inefficiency immediately. He purchased the company outright through a shell corporation called Blackthorn Holdings. The deal closed on a Thursday morning. The previous CEO, a lethargic man named Harold Pinter, accepted a 7-figure severance package and retired to a golf community in Scottsdale. None of the staff knew what the new owner looked like. Marcus had used a proxy lawyer for all meetings, a stern woman named Diane Cross, who spoke in short, clipped sentences and never revealed her client's identity. The employees of Whitmore speculated wildly. Some thought it was a foreign investment group. Others imagined a tech billionaire looking to diversify. Marcus had a plan. He always had a plan. Before walking through the front door as the owner, he wanted to see the company from the ground up. He wanted to understand exactly where the rot had set in. An MBA from Harvard taught you how to read a balance sheet, but it didn't teach you how to read a culture. The only way to see the truth of an organization was to enter it at its most vulnerable point, the hiring process. He crafted a resume that was intentionally modest. It showed a steady work history, a degree from a state university, and a gap in employment for the last year due to family obligations. He used his real first name but changed the last name to Cole, his mother's maiden name. It was a test that Gerald Fenwick failed spectacularly. He arrived at the Whitmore Logistics headquarters at 9:47 a.m. The building was a 42-story tower of blue glass and steel, dominating the skyline of Viridian City's financial district. The lobby was designed to intimidate. Black marble floors polished to a mirror shine, abstract sculptures that cost more than most people's annual salary, a security desk manned by 2 uniformed guards who looked more like bouncers at an exclusive nightclub. The reception area had leather chairs that squeaked when you moved, and a digital check-in kiosk that required you to input your social security number just to get a visitor badge. Marcus walked up to the kiosk and pressed the button for Human Resources Scheduled Interview. The screen flashed, "Please wait for escort." He stood with his hands in his pockets, observing. He watched a junior analyst get berated by a senior manager for holding the elevator door. He saw an administrative assistant nearly break into tears because the coffee order for a board meeting was slightly wrong. He noticed the security guards laughing at a job applicant who was asked to leave because his tie wasn't the correct shade of navy. The culture wasn't just rotten, it was septic. After 22 minutes of waiting, Gerald Fenwick emerged from the elevator bank. He was 53 years old, a career middle manager who had clawed his way into a regional HR role through office politics rather than competence. His suit was expensive but ill-fitting, a Brioni that strained against his midsection. His watch was a flashy gold chronograph that he kept glancing at, not to check the time, but to make sure others noticed it. He smelled of too much cologne, a harsh cedar scent that arrived 3 steps before he did. Gerald walked directly past Marcus without acknowledging him. He approached the receptionist, a young woman named Clara with bright eyes and a nervous smile. "Where's the next applicant?" Gerald asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't have all day. The new owner could walk through that door any minute, and I need to be ready to impress." Clara pointed towards Marcus. Gerald turned slowly, his eyes scanning the worn jacket, the scuffed shoes, the quiet posture. His expression shifted from impatience to outright disgust. It was the look of a man who judged entire books by their covers and had built a career on excluding anyone who didn't fit his narrow, shallow definition of success. "You," Gerald said, his voice dripping with contempt, "you're Marcus Cole, the one who applied for the senior strategy manager role?" "That's correct," Marcus said, extending his hand. Gerald ignored the gesture. He let Marcus's hand hang in the air for an uncomfortable 5 seconds before turning back to Clara. "Did you even screen this one? Look at him. We're a billion-dollar enterprise, not a soup kitchen." Clara's face flushed red. "His qualifications met all the requirements on paper, sir." "Paper means nothing," Gerald snapped. He turned back to Marcus, stepping close enough that Marcus could smell the coffee on his breath. "Let me explain how this works. Whitmore Logistics is an elite institution. We hire from certain schools, certain families, certain backgrounds. We don't take chances on unknowns who wander in from the bus station. Do you understand?" Marcus remained perfectly calm. His heartbeat remained steady at 68 beats per minute. He had faced down hostile takeover attempts, aggressive competitors, and corrupt politicians. A petty tyrant like Gerald Fenwick was barely a speed bump in his world. "I understand that you have an open position, and I'm qualified to fill it. I'd appreciate the opportunity to present my credentials." Gerald laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that echoed off the marble walls. "You'd appreciate? Did you hear that, Clara? He'd appreciate." He stepped even closer, lowering his voice to a mock-sympathetic whisper. Let me give you some free career advice, my friend. Go back to wherever you came from. Apply for a warehouse position. Maybe if you work hard for 10 or 15 years, you can become a shift supervisor. But this, he gestured vaguely at the lobby, this is a different league. You're not even playing the same sport. Gerald motioned to one of the security guards, a bulky man named Raymond with a shaved head and a square jaw. Raymond, escort this gentleman back to the street. He's finished here. Raymond approached with the weary reluctance of a man who had done this too many times. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. Marcus looked at Raymond, not with anger, but with a calm that was almost unnerving. I'm not leaving, but don't worry, this isn't your fault. You're just following orders.
Raymond hesitated. There was something in Marcus's tone that didn't match his appearance, a weight, an authority. Most people Raymond escorted out were either belligerent or tearful. This man was neither. He stood like someone who owned the ground beneath his feet. "You're wasting everyone's time, pal," Gerald said, delivering the line that would haunt him. "Sir, I'm just asking for a fair interview," Marcus replied. That was when Gerald threw the resume on the floor. The paper fluttered down, landing near Marcus's shoes. The words, "Harvard MBA summa cum laude," stared up at the ceiling. Gerald didn't look at the paper. He was too busy enjoying his moment of dominance, puffing out his chest, glancing around the lobby to ensure everyone was watching his display of power. "Security will escort you out," Gerald repeated. "We don't hire strays off the street for corporate strategy roles. Go apply for a forklift position if you're that desperate." Marcus reached into his pocket. The movement was slow and deliberate. Raymond tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt. But what Marcus pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a keycard. Solid black, no markings except for a small embossed logo in the corner, a stylized hawthorn tree, the symbol of Blackthorn Holdings. It was the kind of keycard that only one person in the entire company possessed, the kind that granted access to every room, every floor, every secured file in the building. Gerald's smirk didn't disappear immediately. It took a moment for his brain to process what he was seeing. He recognized the logo. Everyone in the company had been briefed about the Blackthorn Holdings acquisition. They had been told to expect a visit from the new owner at some point, though no one knew when or in what form. "What is that?" Gerald asked, his voice losing some of its confidence. "You've made a very expensive mistake, Gerald," Marcus said. "I'll see you in the boardroom in 30 minutes. The color drained from Gerald's face in stages. First, his cheeks went pale. Then his lips tightened into a thin, bloodless line. His hands, which had been gesturing dramatically moments before, fell limp at his sides. Clara gasped. Raymond took a step backward, suddenly grateful that he hadn't put his hands on this man. Marcus walked past Gerald towards the executive elevator. He didn't rush, he didn't gloat, he simply moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove and nothing to fear. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. He stepped inside, turned around, and fixed his eyes on Gerald as the doors slid closed. The lobby erupted into whispered chaos the moment the elevator began to ascend. Gerald stood frozen, staring at the spot where Marcus had been standing. His resume still lay on the floor. Clara picked it up carefully, her eyes scanning the credentials that Gerald had refused to read. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling, "this man has a Harvard MBA. He spent 6 years as VP of Operations at Granite Shipping. He's not a stray from the street." Gerald snatched the paper from her hands and read it quickly. His breathing became shallow. Granite Shipping was a major competitor that had been acquired 3 years ago by an unknown buyer. The pieces started falling into place in his mind, a horrifying puzzle that formed a picture of his own termination. No. The boardroom occupied the entire 40th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Viridian City's skyline and the silver ribbon of the Meridian River beyond.
The table was a 24-foot slab of polished walnut, surrounded by 16 high-backed leather chairs. At the head of the table was a chair that had been vacant since Harold Pinter's departure. Everyone referred to it as the ghost chair, waiting for its new occupant. Word spread through the building faster than any official memo could have managed. An email from an anonymous source in the lobby, a text message chain that multiplied exponentially. By the time Marcus reached the 40th floor, 73 employees had already heard that the new owner had been insulted, mocked, and nearly physically removed from his own building. The executive floor was in a state of barely controlled panic. Diane Cross arrived within 8 minutes of receiving Marcus's text. She was a 57-year-old attorney who had handled more hostile takeovers than most lawyers saw in a lifetime. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she carried a leather briefcase that contained the full documentation of the acquisition. She met Marcus in the hallway outside the boardroom, her heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor. "I assume Gerald Fenwick isn't going to enjoy this meeting," Diane said, her voice dry as desert air. "He's going to remember it for the rest of his career," Marcus replied, "however short that career may be." The board members are assembled. I took the liberty of preparing Fenwick's termination paperwork, effective immediately, for cause: gross misconduct, creating a hostile work environment, and violating company anti-discrimination policies. Good. Let's not keep them waiting. The boardroom doors swung open. Inside, 11 members of the Whitmore Logistics Board sat around the table, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright fear. Gerald Fenwick stood near the window, his back pressed against the glass, as if he was trying to disappear into the skyline. His tie was loosened. His face was the color of old oatmeal. Marcus walked to the head of the table. He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he placed his hands on the back of the ghost chair and looked at each person in the room, one by one. The silence stretched for 15 seconds, then 20, then 30. No one dared to speak. "My name is Marcus Cole, or, as some of you may now realize, Marcus Whitmore. I am the founder and sole proprietor of Blackthorn Holdings. 8 days ago, I completed the acquisition of this company. Every share, every asset, every decision now flows through this chair." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room like a heavy blanket. "This morning, I decided to experience the hiring process from the perspective of an applicant. I wanted to understand how this company treats people who walk through its doors looking for an opportunity. What I discovered was a culture of arrogance, cruelty, and systemic disrespect led by one of your senior HR managers." He turned to Gerald. "Mr. Fenwick, please step forward." Gerald didn't move. His feet seemed bolted to the floor. Diane Cross gave him a look that could cut glass. "Mr. Fenwick, when the owner of the company asks you to step forward, you step forward." Gerald shuffled towards the table, his expensive shoes suddenly looking like concrete blocks. He stopped about 6 feet from Marcus, unable to meet his eyes. "In the lobby 30 minutes ago, you called me a stray. You threw my resume on the floor. You told me I wasn't playing the same sport. You told me to apply for a forklift position. Is that accurate?" Gerald's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "You also mocked my clothing. You made a comment about a $30 jacket. Let me tell you something about that jacket, Gerald. I bought it at a Value Mart 3 years ago because I needed something to wear while volunteering at a food bank. I've worn it to board meetings, to charity events, and to my mother's funeral. The price tag on a jacket does not determine the value of the man wearing it." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Marcus's words were landing like hammers on an anvil. "This company has been losing $900,000 a month because of incompetent management. You have a turnover rate of 47% in your entry-level positions because managers like Gerald Fenwick treat new hires like disposable parts.
You have 3 pending discrimination lawsuits that my legal team discovered during due diligence, and yet, instead of fixing those problems, your HR director was too busy judging a job applicant by the price of his blazer." Marcus turned to face the entire board. Effective immediately, Gerald Fenwick is terminated for cause.
He will receive no severance. His conduct this morning has been documented and will be submitted to the State Labor Board. Furthermore, I am ordering a full audit of every hiring decision made under his supervision over the last 4 years. Any candidate who was rejected for reasons unrelated to their qualifications will be contacted and offered a new opportunity to apply. Gerald Fenwick's termination was immediate and absolute. 2 security guards, different ones than Raymond, who was currently being interviewed by Diane Cross about the morning's events, entered the boardroom and escorted Gerald to his office. He was given 20 minutes to clear out his personal belongings under supervision. His company credit cards were deactivated during the elevator ride down. His email account was frozen. His access badge was confiscated and cut in half with a heavy-duty scissors. Gerald's office was a corner space on the 31st floor with a view of the parking garage. It wasn't the most prestigious location, but Gerald had decorated it like a throne room. Framed certificates of dubious management seminars, a photograph of Gerald shaking hands with a local politician who had since been indicted, a leather desk set that he told everyone cost $2,000 but was actually a convincing replica worth about $150. The security guards watched as he loaded his belongings into a cardboard box. His hands were shaking so badly that he dropped a paperweight shaped like a golf ball, and it rolled under his desk. "Leave it," one of the guards said. Gerald's walk of shame took him through the central corridor of the 31st floor, past the cubicles of the HR department that he had ruled with an iron fist for 12 years. The employees he had belittled, micromanaged, and tormented watched in stunned silence. No one said goodbye. No one offered to help him carry his box. One woman, a payroll specialist named Teresa, who Gerald had once forced to work through her daughter's birthday party, allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. When Gerald reached the lobby, Clara was still at her desk. She watched him approach the exit, his cardboard box clutched against his chest, his expensive tie stained with coffee he had spilled during his panicked packing. He paused near her desk, as if expecting some words of comfort or sympathy. Clara said nothing. She simply turned her attention back to her computer screen and began typing. Gerald pushed through the revolving doors and stood on the sidewalk, blinking in the harsh midday sun. The city bustled around him, indifferent to his destruction. He had no job, no severance, and, as he would discover over the coming weeks, no prospects. Marcus's legal team made sure his conduct was thoroughly documented and shared with the State Labor Board. 3 companies that Gerald applied to over the next month received anonymous tips about the circumstances of his termination. He was unhirable in the logistics industry, and the stain followed him everywhere he went. Meanwhile, inside the tower, Marcus was just getting started. After Gerald's removal, he convened a meeting with the remaining HR staff. He sat at a conference table, not at the head, but in the middle, surrounded by the people who had been silenced and intimidated for years. "Tell me everything," Marcus said. "No fear, no repercussions. I want to know every single thing that's broken in this department." What followed was a 4-hour session that revealed the full extent of the damage. Employees described a culture of favoritism where Gerald's friends received promotions regardless of performance. They detailed a hiring system that automatically rejected applicants from certain zip codes. They exposed a pattern of retaliation against anyone who questioned Gerald's decisions. Teresa, the payroll specialist, broke down as she described how Gerald had denied her a raise for 3 consecutive years while giving himself a 40% bonus. Marcus listened. He took notes on a yellow legal pad with a simple ballpoint pen. He asked follow-up questions. He treated every person in that room with the same respect he would offer a senior executive, because he understood something that Gerald and his ilk never would. The people at the bottom of the org chart were the ones who actually kept the company running.
By the end of the week, Marcus had implemented a complete overhaul of the HR department. He promoted Teresa to department head with a $40,000 salary increase. He eliminated the automated resume screening software that had been rejecting qualified candidates based on arbitrary criteria. He established an anonymous reporting system for workplace harassment. He mandated that every manager above a certain level spend 1 day per quarter working alongside entry-level employees in the warehouse, the mailroom, and the customer service center. Marcus understood that systemic change required public accountability. 2 weeks after Gerald's termination, he called an all-hands meeting in the company's main auditorium, a massive space on the second floor that could seat all 800 headquarters employees. The room filled with nervous energy. Rumors had been swirling. Everyone had heard about the new owner's dramatic entrance and Gerald Fenwick's humiliating exit, but no one knew what was coming next. Marcus walked onto the stage wearing a simple gray sweater and dark jeans. No suit, no tie, no attempt to project the image of a typical corporate overlord. He stood at the center of the stage behind a simple podium with no branding, no logo, no flashy graphics. "My name is Marcus Cole. 2 weeks ago, your former HR director looked at my clothes and decided I wasn't worth his time. He threw my resume on the floor. He told me I didn't belong in this building. He was wrong, but he wasn't alone. The culture that allowed him to behave that way has been festering in this company for years, and that culture ends today." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. 800 people held their breath. Effective immediately, we're implementing a new hiring policy. Every application submitted to this company will be reviewed by a human being. No more automated rejections. No more filtering by zip code or alma mater. We will hire based on character, competence, and potential. Nothing else matters. A ripple of surprised murmurs moved through the crowd. In addition, I am personally funding a scholarship program for employees who want to pursue further education. If you work in the warehouse and you want an MBA, this company will pay for it. If you're an administrative assistant who wants to become an engineer, we'll cover your tuition. I don't care where you started. I care about where you're going. The murmurs turned into applause, scattered at first, then building into a wave of genuine enthusiasm. Marcus waited for it to subside before continuing. "There's a quote I've carried with me for a long time," Marcus said. "Character isn't revealed in how you treat your equals. It's revealed in how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Remember that. I'll see you all in the trenches." The applause that followed lasted for nearly 3 minutes. People stood. Teresa, the newly promoted HR director, wiped tears from her eyes. The employees who had suffered under Gerald's regime for years felt something they hadn't experienced in a long time: hope.
Gerald Fenwick's life unraveled with the quiet precision of a well-executed audit. 6 weeks after his termination, the State Labor Board opened a formal investigation into his hiring practices. 11 former job applicants came forward with stories of discriminatory treatment. 4 of them filed civil suits. Without the protection of Whitmore Logistics' legal department, Gerald was forced to hire a cut-rate attorney who spent more time golfing than preparing his defense. His wife, a woman named Patricia, who had married him for his income and tolerated him for his absence, filed for divorce 3 months after he lost his job. She kept the house in the gated community of Silver Creek Estates. She kept the Mercedes sedan. She kept the joint bank accounts that Gerald had used to fund his lifestyle. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the north side of Viridian City, not far from the modest neighborhood where Marcus had lived before the acquisition. The symmetry was not lost on him. Gerald tried to rebuild. He applied for positions at every logistics firm within a 200-mile radius. Each rejection stung worse than the last. He applied to retail chains, call centers, even the very warehouse jobs he had once mocked. His reputation preceded him everywhere. Marcus had not actively sabotaged his search. That would have been beneath him. But the truth had a way of spreading through the industry grapevine. A former HR director who publicly humiliated his own CEO was not a hot commodity on the job market.
One Thursday afternoon, 7 months after his termination, Gerald found himself standing in line at a food bank on the south side of Viridian City. It was the same food bank that Marcus had volunteered, the one connected to the worn jacket that Gerald had mocked. Gerald didn't know that. He stood in line with a reusable grocery bag, wearing a faded polo shirt and jeans that sagged around his waist. He had lost 31 pounds since his termination, not from a new fitness regimen, from stress and poverty. The woman distributing canned goods was Mrs. Gable, Marcus's former neighbor from the apartment building. She didn't recognize Gerald, but Gerald recognized her from the news coverage of Marcus's story. Everyone in the city knew about the CEO who went undercover in his own company. Marcus had become a folk hero of sorts, featured in a 12-page spread in Business Horizon magazine under the headline, "The Man Who Fired His Own Bully." His scholarship program had sent 47 employees back to school. His reformed hiring policies had been adopted by 3 other companies. He was building an empire on the foundation of respect and accountability. Gerald read every article. He watched every interview. He saw Marcus accepting an award from the Viridian City Chamber of Commerce, standing on a stage in a perfectly tailored suit, thanking the employees who made his success possible. He watched from his threadbare couch, eating a microwave dinner that cost $2.50, and he understood, with the crushing clarity of hindsight, that his own arrogance had been the architect of his destruction. There was no redemption arc for Gerald Fenwick. He didn't get a moment of reconciliation. He didn't receive a gracious phone call from Marcus offering him a second chance. Marcus was not a cruel man, but he was a practical one. He believed that some bridges were meant to stay burned. Gerald had not just insulted a job applicant, he had exposed a fundamental flaw in his character that no amount of apologies could repair. The last image of Gerald came from a local news segment about food bank volunteers. A camera panned across a line of people waiting for donations, and there he was, blurred slightly in the background, his eyes fixed on the ground. He never looked up. He never saw the reporter or the camera. He simply shuffled forward when the line moved, a ghost haunting the margins of a story that was no longer about him. Marcus, meanwhile, stood on the observation deck of Whitmore Tower, looking out at the city he had helped shape. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Diane Cross stood beside him, holding a tablet that displayed the latest quarterly earnings. Revenue was up 14%. Employee satisfaction scores had tripled. The company was thriving. "You know," Diane said, "most people in your position would have just fired him quietly and moved on. You made a statement." "I didn't make a statement. I set a standard. There's a difference." He looked down at the city streets far below, where people were heading home after long days of honest work. Some of them were his employees. Some of them were his competitors. All of them were human beings deserving of dignity. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. "Character isn't revealed in how you treat your equals," Marcus said quietly, repeating the line that had become his personal motto. "It's revealed in how you treat those who can do nothing for you. That's the standard, and I'm going to spend the rest of my career enforcing it." Diane smiled. It was a rare expression for her. "I think you already have." Marcus turned away from the window and walked back towards the elevator, ready for the next challenge, the next acquisition, the next opportunity to prove that power didn't have to corrupt. It could also elevate. It could also heal. It could also build something that mattered. If this story of karma and quiet power resonated with you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that staying calm is the ultimate strength. And drop a comment below. What's the one quote from this story that stuck with you the most? I'll see you in the next one.